Hey, for another shot fired.
Copy, additional shot fired.
Shot fired, shooting at us.
Suspect shooting an officer.
Suspect down. He's at the base of the stairs, white t-shirt, white male.
Coming to you from Northern California.
Negative K, nothing further, just
This is the Shots Fired Podcast.
Back on that town property case, Smoky 76.
With your hosts, Sergeant Kyle Schoberg, retired police officer Mark Redlich, and Deputy Billy. We are America's leading law enforcement resource for training and tactics from experts in the industry. Here are your hosts.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Shots Fired Podcast. We're super pumped. We're here in our new studio, first time filming in here. Not fully probably complete setting it up, but this is what we got so far. So we're excited. It's a lot bigger, and we're going to have a lot more opportunity to bring people in studio, which we have planned, and have guests, live guests in here with us. So that's pretty exciting. So we are excited about that. Today, as some of you saw who follow us on social media, we are going to talk about the Uvalde school shooting that occurred in Texas last week. Obviously, that's a tragic event. There's a lot of things to cover in this topic, really from A to Z, how this happened, kind of what our thoughts are on it, and maybe coming up with solutions on how to prevent these school shootings, because that's just really what it boils down to. Is this stuff is happening way too often. And instead of all the finger pointing that's going on, there needs to be a solution to take care of the problem, to prevent them moving forward. I think
it's help prevent. I don't think there's going to be any
you're right.
one answer that
you're
says,
right.
Hey, this is what we can do to stop this.
Dude, you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, you're 100% right. Like, I don't think you can ever prevent evil from happening. Mm-hmm. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But there are
measures.
But there are things that can be put in place where I feel like we should be able to slow this stuff down, or slow a shooter down if they do try to make their way into a school. So we'll talk about all that. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time chatting amongst ourselves, because this is such a big topic. We're going to dive right into it. So without further ado, Mark, give everybody kind of a guideline of how this conversation is going to go.
So we really discuss this in depth, and what our thoughts are is that based on all the media, news outlets, political figures, what's happening is there's a lot of finger pointing and a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking of what happened. There is a way to learn from that, but what we really think is important is, how do you talk about an incident, this being one, and then most importantly, learn from it to prevent and try to prevent further incidents in the future. So pre-discussion, we really kind of broke it down into 4 categories. One category being the social media aspect. And then the second category is parenting. And then the third category is the schools. And then the fourth is the law enforcement and their response to these incidents. And so what we'll do is we'll kind of break down each one, so it's pretty clear chapters. And then at the end, each of us are going to give a little synopsis of what we believe is how to learn from this and how to prevent it, and kind of recap our actual thoughts on that. So I think the first, if we break it down, really going into talking about social media and how that plays a role in what's been happening, and what we could do in our ideas to actually prevent another incident.
Well, and before real quick we jump into that, like, I think it's so easy to Monday morning quarterback, and we're so good at it in this profession, but because of the emotions that went into this event, the whole world has been Monday morning quarterbacking it. Some people, I think, have no place with their opinion and some of the things that have been said. Others, maybe, but the point is.
I think that the people that are allowed to Monday morning quarterback are the people that were there and have intimate knowledge of it.
Sure.
We can sit there. We're in law enforcement. We may get a little more information than the general public, but in the end, I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what was going on when, and why. They made decisions off of reasoning. I'm sure it wasn't just like nope or yep. It was they had a reason, and forever, whatever that reason was, they did what they did.
Well, and we all know we've all three been in numerous critical incidents, not to that severity.
No,
I've never been involved in a school shooting like that, but I mean, we've all been in situations. These things take time to break down. There's a lot of evidence that has to be collected. I mean, there's a lot of video footage that has to be compiled and looked at and dissected. There's just so many things that go into these debriefs, and I just don't think it's fair that the day of the shooting, or within 24 hours of the shooting, the media is basically coming up with their own stories. And unfortunately, I think after this incident happened, the director of the, is it DPS for Texas was on the news, and, he gave some false information at first, right? Because he's going off of what he is being told, which ended up not being true and accurate. That happens with every situation, right? Yeah. Minor stuff all the way to the big stuff. Things come out in the beginning that we find out later that aren't initially exactly what happened. And I think, unfortunately, this is such an emotional an event because it involved the death of several children.
Fairly young children too.
You're talking about an elementary school. Yeah.
It makes it even worse. Any death of a child is bad, but once you get down to the elementary school level, and it's just just
terrible. I mean, this is a fucked event. This was fucking evil at its core, and it spiraled out of control. I think from the get-go, things were being said. I don't think that were very accurate, that we know now were not accurate in the beginning. But the unfortunate thing is what I was saying is like people took that information as gospel.
Well, some of that information though, they do take it gospel because, within hours you have all kinds of leaders on the school grounds.
Yeah.
And the media is demanding and wanting, and parents demand and want, and a lot of people deserve to know, but they want information. So they do the best they can, all aspects of whoever's involved, to provide the information they have at the time that they believe is accurate. And then information changes over a period of time. And then, okay, well, this is not true. And this and the timelines and all of that.
And we know that Uvalde is a town of what it says online is 15,000 people. That's a small community. It's rural. It's out in the middle of nowhere. And it's north of the Mexican border.
They have six deputies that work there?
So the school district, from my understanding, the Uvalde school district has 6 police officers that work for the school district. The Uvalde Police Department, I don't know for certain, but I can't foresee them having more than 20 plus cops. So at a town that big, you're probably only talking a few cops on duty at any given time. Right. I mean, I've worked at a small department. I know how that works. So we'll discuss that at the end as far as the response to this whole situation. But I think it's important that we talk about like what leads up to these events. And you mentioned
the social media,
starting out with social media. Yeah. I have my own personal opinions on the whole social media thing. I think it's been proven time and time again. The statistics are out there that young kids that are involved in social media have a very high rate of depression, and suicide rates have skyrocketed in the youth because of social media. I mean, that we know that to be true. You have bullying with students at school. That shit went on when we were at school, right? I mean, we can all agree with that. And I don't think there is an answer to bullying. Kids are going to fucking be mean. As much as you want to try to prevent it and tell kids like, hey, that's wrong. You shouldn't do that. Unfortunately, kids are going to do that, right? Because their brains aren't fully developed, and that's just how they act. They're immature. You add the social media aspect to it, and you're just compounding the problem. You've got, social media is not only is it addicting, but it's almost like a drug where like you're constantly looking for your next high, right? Some kids that are really popular in school are going to have a lot more followers than kids that are not popular, right? So kids are going to look at that and it just compounds into their.
Well, it's a status and it's a coolness.
Yeah, it is. It's a status thing.
And coolness thing where we're all about the same age. When we were going to school, it's, what you're wearing, who your friends are, what activities you're into.
Yeah.
And now it's a whole nother aspect where that is still true.
Like, how many followers do you
Now,
have?
how many followers do you have? Why don't you follow me? Like, simple as that.
Yeah.
Like, you know, things like that can cause their own issues.
You know, when you're looking for that next high of like posting a photo and you're looking for the likes, right? And you look at your phone and like you don't have any more likes than you did an hour ago. That mentally plays a toll on people. Adults, same thing, right? Like it's been proven too that, you know, the release of dopamine and stuff, when you're pulling out your phone and you're looking at your social media and you're like, oh, I got all these likes, right? You're releasing all that dopamine and chemicals that are making you feel good. When you're not getting that, it's the same thing, right? Like you're not getting those chemicals that make you feel good.
And then not to mention the immaturity aspect that, you know, we all did stuff that was dumb when we were high school, middle school, elementary school. I mean, I know I did. I probably can speak for everybody.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And our exposure back then was you did in front of your friends. You did in front of 2, 3, 4. Maybe you did in front of, you know, a recess group or something like that. Maybe 100. But now you do that same thing, but you do it in a picture or a video, and someone else is videoing it. Someone else is taking a picture of it, and that thing can blow up. And now you're looking at tens of thousands of people sometimes are looking at these things and going, oh, look at this idiot. And all of a sudden that's huge. That should give, or probably will give anybody a certain amount of depression.
Oh, for sure. And especially when you have, you know, you have the positive aspect and then there's jealousy amongst the others. Mm-hmm. And those kids that struggle with it, you know, somebody could take a picture of them or post something that's negative. And back when we were in school, if you got bullied or someone said something to you or you walk by, a couple people might hear it and that's it. And maybe somebody tells you, oh, I heard this happen. And that's it. A day or two goes by and it's kind of done. Yeah. But now that picture gets out there or that posting or the Facebook video, and then it goes and it goes and it gets steam. And then more people comment and that bullying just amplifies continuously and you can't escape it.
Yeah. And then the bullies were 1, 2, 3, probably 10 bullies or something is what you were talking about when before social media. Now it's 10 million could be. It's, you know, the whole society out there, because, you know, you're relatively safe behind your keyboard too, you know, or your phone where you're like, oh, I can say, you know, Mark looks stupid today, but I wouldn't say it to his face because, you know, Mark might be like, what the hell you say I look stupid?
Yeah.
Well, it comes down to there's zero accountability on the internet. You can say whatever you want to somebody and there's absolutely fucking no accountability whatsoever for internet trolls. Like we know that. So it's like the whole social media thing. And if we look at the suspect in this shooting, we're not even going to mention that piece of shit's name, but you know, the little information they have put out about him, because everybody's so focused on what went wrong. You know, nobody wants to talk about him. You know, the little information that I have found is he meets that profile of the typical kid, 18, you know, young teens, middle-aged person that was probably bullied, didn't fit in with anybody at school. Right. They interviewed coworkers that worked with him at the Wendy's that he was working at prior to purchasing all these firearms. Everyone had the same thing to say about him. Right. They all said he was just off, putting out all these red flags, but nobody said anything. Right. So like the profile is there.
Something. You can't go off of.
I'm not saying it did. I'm not saying it would have.
There's no
I'm just saying
watch list. There's no school shooter watch list out there.
Sure. And I'm not saying that
you could do anything with that.
Right. But what I'm saying is like the profile is there.
Right.
Right. So the social media thing, like I do think that plays a huge role into the mental aspect of these kids. Personally, I think there needs to be an age limit on social media. It's fucking out of control with how many kids and the age that kids have social media nowadays. It's disgusting. It should not happen.
I think that there's no way of doing that unless we roll onto our next topic and talk about parenting, because that's what it is.
You're right.
It's not, I don't think there should ever be a law that says if you are under 18, under 16, under 14, under 12, whatever you want to say, you can't have social media. I don't think that should ever be.
Because some kids are responsible with it and some aren't.
I just don't. Maybe there is, but I don't know. There's some good behind social media too.
There is, for sure.
And I just think that that's a parenting thing. And I know it's hard. It's not exactly that easy of kids are going to do things behind the parents' back. We did it growing up. Everyone does. So to say that they're not going to have social media when you tell them not to is a possibility, but you got to be parenting. You got to be there and be like, hey, looking at their social media, maybe it's even better that you let them have social media, because then you're a friend of theirs and you get to see what's going on.
Yeah.
So that is a good segue to the parents.
Okay. Yeah. And so what about parents are allowing elementary school age kids to have cell phones with internet access on them? I mean, these things are a mobile computer.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and with that, there's so many apps, there's so many phones out there that you can buy a phone that has your numbers in it, the numbers that you put into it, and you give it to your kid, and you say it can call mom, dad, grandma, best friend, neighbor, whatever it is. You could put however many it is, I don't know, but you can put those in there and say you can text, you can call, and that's it. And these are the people. I think that's great because, don't you want to know where your kid is sometimes, especially when they're a little bit older? I mean, now with your younger ones, hopefully you're not like, where's my kid right now?
Yeah. And I fully support that. What about parents that are giving their kids these phones with full access?
Full access? I mean,
well, the thing with that
depends on the age.
I think there should be an age limit for social media. And I don't know what age that is.
But law-wise, you think?
Yeah, similar to like cigarettes or driving. We know that kids smoke at a younger age. We know that kids drive cars at a younger age.
Okay, but you can't buy pornography till you're 18, right? I think that's still the law. I don't know.
I don't know.
But is there 12-year-olds looking at pornography?
Oh, of course.
But how do you regulate it? How do you do that? I mean, I don't know.
But I think if they enact
Parenting.
something,
yeah,
it makes it a little more difficult. And I think that's the part, is just to make it a little more difficult. And it gives the parents, hey, you can't have this until you're 16. And I think it gives the parents a little more grit to say no, because there's no age limit on now. And you look at 5 years ago, when I first got my first cell phone, I was 16, and that was because I got a car.
Yeah, that's when I did too.
And then it started, okay, well then, my younger friends were like, well, I want a phone. And it's like, well, my sibling's 2 years younger. And then now I'm 12. And then now it's like 7-year-olds have phones. So it's like, where is that? Where is the cushion? And parents play a role with the social media aspect. They really should be monitoring and paying attention. And I have friends that do no supervision when it comes to that. And you can tell the difference. And then I have friends that are very involved, because they are very involved with their kids in all aspects. They're great parents, and they don't have those social media problems. Their kids aren't glued to the phones. They're not giving their kids a tablet as a babysitter or a distraction so they can do something different. I think parenting and all of this is a huge role. And I think there's a big culture of, when we were growing up, our parents were parents. Like, my parents weren't my friends. My friends' parents weren't friends. They taught you, and their role was to teach you to become young adults, to prepare you for life. And what I see now with a lot of younger adults that are parenting is it's more of like friends. They're calling their kids bro and what's up, dude, and like, oh, okay. And then the children are making decisions. Like, a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old, you're asking them, what do you want to eat at a drive-through window? And you're waiting and waiting. It's like, there's different things parents can do to prevent this stuff. And I think that's the whole basis of all this conversation, is like bring light that there's multiple elements to criminals. And this school shooting, it's horrific, but it's a crime. And it's something that we're seeing more of. So trying to focus on how do we limit that? And I think the social media in the parents aspect is one of those.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned it, like the using the phone as a babysitter. Like this is the new technology, new day and age babysitter right here.
I just don't think, I think that one of us can talk about that here. Honestly, I'm not a parent. You're not a parent.
Well, I'm guilty of it.
Exactly. And you have your reasons though. And that's what I'm saying is, I don't want to sit here and be like, no, you can't give your kid your tablet. And you're like, you know what? This kid's driving me up a wall, and I'm at my wit's end. And if I give him the tablet and he watches a video that I know, or a YouTube video that I know about, that I'm, monitoring for the most part, he shuts the heck up for 10 minutes. And I'm like, I can
take
gather
a
my
shower.
thoughts for 10 minutes.
Or eat dinner.
Or eat dinner,
Yeah,
whatever it is. So I'm not going to say, no, you shouldn't be doing that. Or, like I look at the, all family vehicles now, it seems like they have DVD players or whatever it is now in the cars.
Yeah.
But you know, it never happened when we were doing, but it's like, hey, I can drive now because my kid shut up for an hour.
Yeah, but we don't have kids, but we don't have to have kids to know what's right. You don't have to be a parent to know what's right or wrong.
But I'm not saying that. I'm saying right or wrong is gray in a lot of these areas.
Yes, you're right. There is.
And the gray area is as long as you're and every parent, I don't know because I'm not a parent, but every parent has done something wrong.
Of course.
Daily will do something wrong probably.
But if you bought a vehicle that has a headrest, that has a TV on it, and you get in the car and you turn that thing on, what you're losing is the value of teaching your kids where you're going. Look at these trees. This is the type of tree. Check out these cars. This is what we're doing.
But can't you have both? Can't you be like, okay, I'm well rested. I got this little drive or whatever. You've driven to the school 1,000 times. We got a half-hour drive. We're going to grandma's, whatever it is. I mean, parents will go crazy at some point.
You're right. Yeah.
Like, I need a little peace and quiet.
I think, yes. And I think that's the balancing act in these situations where there's school shooters. I don't think there's a balancing act.
Right.
I think it's the extreme where it's.
Well, everything in moderation, not everything, but most things in moderation are acceptable to me. A lot of things are.
That's perfectly
It's controlled moderation, most things.
So I think part of the problem is all these videos that these kids are watching on YouTube and though they're meant for kids, like it is violent stuff. And I've seen it. I've seen my kids watching it and it's caught me off guard sometimes because I'm not monitoring my kids 100% of the time. They're watching YouTube and all this stuff. Like I'm guilty of that. But where it becomes an issue, I think, is at such a young age, these kids are being desensitized to violence. I see it all the time with, young kids now playing around at home and talking about guns and shooting people. And there's a lot of video games out there where you get to play the criminal and you get to go around and shoot cops and citizens.
We played cops. I since the day I can remember, I played cops and robbers as a kid.
It's just different though, dude.
And sometimes you're the robber and you shot the cop, and sometimes you're the cop and you shot the robber. But
I'm telling you, man,
I know
it's
it is different. But those are teaching moments as the parent, and the parent needs to be there.
You're absolutely right.
Needs to be like, oh, you're playing. I can see you have your handgun, or your Nerf gun, or whatever. What are you playing? Oh, okay. And then you're playing with them, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, but I
and
think
you're teaching about it, like, okay, the bad guy, but we don't want to be the bad guy, right? It's fun like this, and everything's fun in games, or not everything, but things are fun in games. This isn't real life. You have that conversation after.
Yeah, I think parents nowadays, it's too easy to be disconnected, and part of that also is because their parents are involved so much in their own phones.
Yeah,
right?
they are.
It's just a revolving door.
You talked about like the cops and robbers aspect, and what one of the things you brought up desensitization and stuff, and I think guns with kids start at an early age.
Yes.
One of the things that isn't really always talked about and rarely is talked about is gun safety. And parents buy children guns at a very young age, and kids run around and point guns at people and say bang bang. And one of the 4 cardinal rules of gun safety is never point a gun at someone unless you intend on shooting them. And at a very young age, that child is learning to do that. And then they get older, they get a little BB gun, and maybe they go outside and shoot things and practice or whatever. But then they get airsoft guns, and then they start shooting each other, and then they want to get a paintball, and then that ingrains shooting. And then you combine that with these violent video games that you're talking about, and it's shooting and killing. So it becomes almost like a normal sense of behavior of seeing people shooting and holding guns and pointing them at people, where I was never allowed to point a gun at anybody, even fake guns. Like I can't even, I had one paintball when I was a child, and we got our asses kicked if you shot it at somebody. And that was never anything that we were allowed to do. But nowadays it seems like when I was a cop and I go to people's houses, there's toy guns everywhere. And like, that is something to prevent in the future. I think people really should consider is, why are we teaching this, and why are we allowing kids? These are tools. A gun is a tool. It's a weapon. It should not be played with. but we'll let them play with a fake one, but not a real one. I think that's confusing. And it
I also
happen.
think that if you have guns at your house, you should be exposing your children to those guns in the right way at the right times.
Yes.
Because otherwise it becomes the forbidden fruit or whatever. And,
Yeah.
and you know, oh, my dad's got a gun. You want to see it?
Yeah.
And I remember growing up, you know, obviously my dad was in law enforcement, so there was guns in my house. And if you know, my dad told me, hey, if you ever want to see one of the guns or something like that, come and get me and I will come and I'll show you it. If you have friends over and they want to see the gun, come and get me. I'll come over and I will show it to them.
Yeah.
And, you know, make sure it's safe and everything. And then he also told me, and this wasn't true because they weren't loaded, but he said, every gun that I have is loaded.
Yeah.
It's because that, and then I was like, okay, you don't point this at anything.
Yeah. But that I think that is really good gun safety and education for children. Mm-hmm. That is important.
And that took me a minute to explain to you guys. And that's about what the explanation was.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't take much.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's just nowadays, you know, I mean, fuck, man, the parents are so engrossed in their own phones and, you know, their kids are engrossed in their phones and the shit is just more and more violent and they're being desensitized to this stuff. There is no gun safety aspect to it. And then let's bring in the mental health side of it, because that is the fucking ground
we already
root.
did. That's what bullying is the mental health aspect.
Well, I'm saying as far as like these kids that have actual mental health issues, right? And the cops are getting called out to the house because at a very young age, kids are threatening to commit suicide. They're cutting themselves.
But that's all because of social media. That's because of, it's not, you know, in rare occasions, it's something that they're born with, that, you know, they're born with,
a condition
of some sort, but it's taught.
It is.
A lot of that is taught, and it's taught through social media. It's taught through bullying, and it's taught through the lack of parenting.
And what happens when we go to these types of calls where it's a young child, 15, you know, sometimes 12 years old? What do we do with them? We take them to the hospital, right? The emergency room. Why? Because we shut down the vast majority of our mental hospitals. So all of our 5150s or our mental health patients, for folks that don't use that term, we have to transport them to the hospital. And I'm fairly certain that around the nation, that is the common theme. You take them to the hospital. That has now drowned out the medical system because the hospital doesn't want to deal with them. And they're basically getting kicked out the front door. And they're not really getting the psych treatment that they probably should. They're not getting on the proper medication.
Well, by the time you go to somebody's home for law enforcement response to someone's home for a mental health, it's too late. Time has gone by, and then you take them to the hospital that is not equipped to deal with that.
And nor do they want to deal with that.
Well, I think a lot of the staff members do, but they don't have the capability because they're not designed. A hospital is not designed for that. Where if we were to implement, and I think that's part of the prevention, is implement those mental health organizations and those hospitals and open them back up, provide resources. So when young adults that have young kids that start acting out and they start having behavioral issues and they struggle, they have a place to go as a resource. That's not a hospital, sit in the emergency room. They have a place to go where they can help and talk to a real professional and get guidance. And it's, okay, well, this child actually needs medication, or no, your child doesn't need medication. It's this. And that's the problem solving. But we cut that off in 2008. Well, I say we, but those resources were cut off. And now we're seeing in this huge swing of long delays of mental health where when you go to those calls, they're really bad.
Yeah.
Because there is no resource.
And what happens when the police are getting called out to a house, you know, because they're an out of control 12-year-old or 13 or 14-year-old, right? And you now become the bad guy. Like the police is now the bad guy because you're the one that has to tell this kid, sorry, you're coming with me and I'm taking you to the hospital. It's a negative encounter for law enforcement.
We're going right back to our topics of parenting.
Yeah.
We're going back to parenting, we're going back to bullying, and we're going back to social media.
Yeah.
The only other aspect is drugs. We brought it up as the positive of giving the correct medications.
It's medication.
But we're also forgetting the negative of the access to illegal drugs that completely rewire your brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And cause mental health in their own way, even when you're not on it, you know.
Yeah.
You know, they create their own and the access is there. Simple things. The access is at your house, some of the stuff. prescriptions and all that. So,
yeah, I think I think the amount of drugs that are probably in the public schools is so much higher than parents or adults even know, right?
Yeah.
Like it's so prevalent now.
Well, that's
It's just too easy to get.
Let's talk about that, the schools, because we just bridged right into that.
Go ahead.
Okay.
when it comes to school shootings, is that what we're talking about, or when it comes to
school
mental
safety? I
health
think
and everything. Like, well, I mean, school safety. We can look at all kinds. I remember when I was a kid, phones weren't allowed at school.
Yep. Same
Like
here.
even when you were 16 or whatever, and I got a cell phone, it was like not even allowed in my backpack. I had to leave it in the car, and I think that's I think that's the way it should be. They say, oh,
100%.
They say the emergency, and I'm like, if that's the only way that you have to contact medical or fire or law enforcement, then again, the schools need to think of a different way of doing things.
Yeah.
So
I think with the school stuff, the safety aspects, I had a good conversation over the weekend with a friend that's a teacher. Like, schools, unless you're lucky enough to go to a brand new school, most schools are super outdated. They're really old. The layout and the design is very open campuses, one doors, no way to go out the back. The locks are reversed where you can't actually lock them from the inside. So the school aspects, they're not designed to be safe, secure locations. And I think what we're seeing over time is that active shooters and people that target large groups of people go to those locations, a school being one, because it's a soft target and you have big numbers. They've made it very difficult to have active shooters in hospitals. They've made it very difficult to active shooters in the malls. Like all these concerts and all these things, they're making it very difficult targets for active shooters. I think it's important to point out again, the point of it is the prevention for the next one, to try and prevent it, is schools aren't designed to be safe as that. So I think what needs to happen is the locks on the doors. Every room should be locked. If your kid has to leave and use the bathroom, a plan has to be developed for that. I don't have all the answers, but there needs to be plans for that. And we need to make schools harder targets where it's not like, I'm going to be an active shooter and I'm going to go to this school because anybody could walk onto that. And I know you guys have been to schools, especially in law enforcement, they're open. You can easily walk onto campuses and there's no accountability. And to bridge that, teachers also look like normal parents because teachers wear whatever clothing they want. I think it would be important that teachers in schools really consider a uniformed presence of all of teachers so they all look the same. So it's very easy to identify that that's a teacher, because part of a teacher's role is having kids look up to you. And if you dress professional in an aspect and all teachers dress the same, every teacher looks like, hey, all these teachers look professional. That's who I want to idolize, because teachers are idols, And if teachers all look similar in clothing, attire, they're easier to identify when you have somebody on campus that's not supposed to be there. So I think what needs to happen is schools need to harden their targets. And one of the things about society and stuff is the anti-police and withdrawing funds and cutting funds and demilitarizing the police is they've withdrawn police from schools, which opens up targets. And I think that's another aspect that needs to be considered is what is the security? We know that we don't want cops in every single classroom. Like, we don't want that. Nobody wants that because that's saying it's a very dangerous environment. But we need to have cops integrated in schools. But what we need to do is make them harder targets. And I'll just use one more example and I'll turn it over to one of you. But you look at homes. When homes were first built in like the 30s and 40s, no locks were on the front doors. People started breaking into homes, so they put locks on the doors to make it harder. Then people would kick the side doors. They'd break windows, so some people put alarms in their homes. And now people put security cameras because you try to make it difficult. We know schools are soft targets. I think what we need to do is make them harder targets.
Yeah.
And I agree with all that. The only thing that I will say is I don't think there's many people that would disagree with most of that. I do think that some people would say, okay, who's paying for that? Where's this funding coming from? Where's that? And
I can easily answer that. Let me answer that. take the funds and shift it from the transient population.
Okay.
To that.
And I get that. And look, I think a lot of people would agree with that, but there's, that's a whole political issue.
Yeah. It's
that
totally
we're not even going to, we don't have a 10 episode series to get into that.
Yeah.
But I do say that it's just, we can sit here and we all have good ideas. And I think that a lot of people have a lot of these good ideas, but why are they not being implemented? Why is there not funding being put towards this kind of stuff? Like these outdated schools, you're talking probably across the nation, easily billions of dollars, right? To update these schools, put in an officer at these schools, you're probably talking another $1 billion.
It's $100,000 an officer at a school, one officer.
Way more than that.
Yeah.
Way more than that. When you talk about everything, the whole everything.
But are we at a point in society where that has to happen?
We should be investing.
I mean, we should be moving towards that. And I think, like you said, at one point, I think we were moving towards that. And now the anti-police rhetoric, and we pulled officers out of the schools, and that, we move backwards. And there's also school, it needs to be a pleasant place, so we don't want to make it a prison, right? And that's the other aspect, right? There's going to be a disagreement to, okay, we lock the school up. We put chain link fence that are 10 feet tall and we put razor wire on top of it. Okay, when you drive by, hey, who put a jail in there? Oh no, that's the high school. Yeah. There's bars on the windows, there's things like that. And you're like, no, there's metal detectors as you're going in. That is a whole nother mental health aspect that you're going to be like, now you have a kid that thinks he's going to prison every single day. Are they going to want to go to school? Is school fun anymore? No, school's not fun anymore. So we have to find this balance, or things that work and things that don't work. And hopefully we move towards something.
Yeah. I think the ironic thing is after the Columbine incident, we all know that there was a huge shift. The primary focus after that incident was, okay, the response to a school shooting on the law enforcement behalf. Right. And I'll say this. I'm friends with somebody that was directly involved in that Columbine incident, who was a police officer who did respond to that shooting, was one of the first guys there. And, he has told me, look, it's out there that everyone's under the belief that the first responding cops did not go into that school. And he says that that's unequivocally inaccurate. They did go into that school. And in fact, there were some officers that engaged in a gunfight with these gunmen. However, after the Columbine incident, this huge paradigm shift of how police respond to school shootings took place. I don't think, but that's after the fact. That's after the school shooting has already started. What I don't think happened was, or it didn't happen enough, is how do we slow these shooters down from getting into the building, right? So we planned.
That's what Mark was saying.
Exactly, but we've taken this long to get to a point now where now everyone's scratching their head, figuring out how the fuck do we slow down someone that wants to come into the school to do the shooting instead of the response of the police. Because let's be honest, the response of the police is fucking over by that point. The statistic is an active shooter generally doesn't last more than 4 minutes. It's done and over with within 4 minutes. So from the first shot to the last shot. So now we need to figure out, how do we slow these people down from getting into the campus? And if that means we have to fence off campuses, which I know a lot of schools are now starting to implement as they build these new schools. But like you said, the vast majority of schools are already built. They're already there. I can tell you right now, my kid's school, in elementary school, it's wide open. There's not one gate or fence that borders that school at all. So if that's what needs to happen, and there's a lot of people out there that are like, well, we shouldn't have to send our kids to a school where it has to be fortified or there has to be metal detectors as they go into the school. Well, fuck, you know what? I'm sorry, but that's just what it's come down to in today's society.
Well, and then, you talk about slowing down a gunman to get into these places. Well, if that officer didn't train and didn't talk to and didn't, that department will say, didn't get with the school and didn't know about those same things that slow down the gunman, but he got through, are the same things that are going to slow down an officer.
And that's true. And that is going to come down to training.
If you have a key, like a master key or something, there should be, we call them Knox boxes. I don't know if that's a nationwide thing or not. There should be a Knox box out front, and that's got a key that goes, okay, I can get into any room here. And I have this, or I have the key ring that can get me into these rooms.
And we have schools that do have that. There is a new elementary school in the city I work in that was only just built a few years ago, and it is completely now fortified with fencing, wrought iron fencing around it. And there are Knox box keys that we have access to be able to get in, because you're right. Like how else now are the police supposed to get in if this person gets in? And is that 100% bulletproof? No, but maybe it'll slow them down enough to where at least the police can respond and take action outside the school versus them getting inside the school, which is what we're going to talk about later, which is what happened in Uvalde. But I don't know. I think the biggest question that parents have the hardest time grasping right now is, and I've thought it myself as a parent, is, my God, like I should not have to send my kid to school and be so worried about them getting injured or killed that there has to be barricades or fencing around the entire school and armed security and metal detectors to get into school. No parent wants to fucking grasp that, but you have to. I agree. You have to.
The culture has to shift to recognize, recognize these are easy targets. The whole point of doing active mass shootings is to hurt and kill as many people as possible. And the way you do that is large crowded events or schools. We know when you go to a large concert or something, there's barricades, there's cops everywhere, there's fencing. They make it very difficult. They do everything they can to prevent that incident. And if it does happen, they have a plan, or a plan has been discussed. And at schools, in the law enforcement response, society needs to understand that law enforcement is responsive. An incident happens and then they respond. There's always a delay unless you happen to be there when it happens, but there's still a delay because you have to process. And if a school can harden that process and implement some tools to make the next one harder, it will buy time for cops to show up to do something. And Billy, you said it great, is like, we don't have answers for all of this. And not everything is great. And I don't want to get my kid to go to a school that has a 6-foot fence with razor wire. But if my kid knows that they're going there and it's safe, then that's important. And you can make aesthetically the environment to look, appealing. And I think some too is like, you talk about like the funding. Well, fuck, I don't know where the funding comes from, but I say fund it, implement, and give these schools money. It should blow and piss every single parent off in society that teachers have to have fundraisers to get pens and pencils and paper for kids at schools. It should piss every parent off that these teachers have 35 children they're responsible for. That is so difficult. That is a huge ask of a teacher. So and somehow funds need to go that way. And there's a billion schools, and I don't even know how it would work.
Well, we're talking about funding. We're coming out of a time where, like, the last 2 years, everybody's been talking about defunding, and part of that movement, which was what? Cops got taken out of schools. They got taken out of schools because the parents were in an uproar because they said kids are scared to go to school because the cops are there. Well, fucking now look what happens. Okay. So look what happens when you want to defund the police, you want to take away resources, you want to take away fucking tools, you want to demilitarize police, and you want to remove police from schools. This is what happens. And now you have all the people that were saying that screaming out loud what a shitty response the cops had, and where the fuck were the cops and what did they do? But it's fucking asinine.
We also have to look at this as this is a one-sided conversation we're having. We're not going to sit here and we're not going to disagree with many things that each other say. There is a whole nother side to it too. There's so many different stories out there. There's so many people they can listen to this and go, oh, you guys don't even know. Like like the whole gun control side and everything like that. That is definitely
that's a big topic.
It is a great topic. It is something that, then we just take the gun out of the guy's hand. Nobody has guns anymore.
Yeah.
And, we know that a lot of people illegally have firearms. So what's to stop them from that?
We come across them every day at work.
Stop that going forward. But there's so much more to it that we can only say our side of it, and we can only say the law enforcement side, and we can't speak for all law enforcement, obviously, but there's a lot to this. There is a whole lot to this, and I wish we did have somebody who disagreed with us more.
Well,
here,
I have my opinions have changed a little because I've been not a cop for the last 2 years, but the defunding of the police and the culture against police in the last maybe 18 years, maybe since 2013, something around there, it's really shifted to an anti-police. And you have political figures, you have sports figures, all government figures that are anti-law enforcement, and they don't like it, and they publicly say that. And you have parents that don't like law enforcement, and they tell their kids, F the police, and look at this, like screw those guys. You have people wearing socks that have pigs on them that are mocking the police officers. Then you have a culture that protests anti-cops. And then it's like, let's take money from them. Let's take their guns. Let's demilitarize them. And then that cop needs to go into work and needs to eat. And then you have people spitting in their food, and you have people throwing stuff at their patrol cars. Like, law enforcement has a very difficult aspect in all of this. And then they're expected to do something.
well, look, it's a difficult job. Anyone who says that it's an easy job probably works in an easy department, I guess. I don't know. I guess there's easy spots out there, but it's an extremely difficult job.
Yeah, it is.
And, it's just, there's so much we do as law enforcement to hurt ourselves too.
Yeah.
We're not innocent in this at all. The defund the police and all that, whether there's some aspects that obviously been embellished and, things we don't agree with, but it takes one officer to do something stupid. One single officer, and that affects, I don't know the numbers, how many cops there are.
All of us.
How many cops there are in the United States or in the world? A million at least, right?
Millions, yeah.
Millions. So it takes one officer doing one thing dumb, especially with social media and the way that, everything is everywhere. Everyone's on camera now, so everyone knows about it.
Yeah.
And then we do little things. We have little traditions. We have little things like a lot of these specialized teams and things like that. They have skulls and stuff like that on their things. The thin blue line, which I don't necessarily agree with that it shows in us versus them, but there is a certain amount of public
perception
that believe that, and the perception's there. So in law enforcement, we need to get rid of it. It's simple as that. Whether I disagree with that or not, it doesn't matter. There are people out there that see it as things like that. So we need to move away from that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. We have law enforcement has to evolve as well.
Yeah, we are not innocent in any of this, and going back to school shootings, we're not innocent in our reactions to it.
Yeah, and we're gonna jump into that. That's a crucial conversation that needs to be had. But I think so. There's a lot of folks that have asked us personally, message us on social media about wanting us to address, what our thoughts are on the response to the shooting. And we've discussed this in length with each other, and we have all agreed that
discussed and argued.
Yes,
there's a lot of arguing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of arguing.
Yeah.
What it comes down to, guys, is nobody has all the facts right now. There are so many different facts and opinions out there that we don't know exactly what happened. We are not going to know exactly what happened until they release all the information. That's going to take time. And I think if we have to remove the emotional side of this to make an accurate depiction and debrief what happened. And the only way to do that is to remove the emotions out of it, as hard as it is to do, review exactly what happened when they release all that, watch the video footage, and from there, I think it's fair for people to make their own assessment. But right now, what I think is not fair, on both sides of the aisle, this whole situation's been politicized, okay? We're in an election season. There's a whole lot of finger pointing going on both sides of the aisle. To me, it's fucking despicable, and nobody's talking or wanting to talk about a resolution to this stuff, okay? What we just talked about on the episode is our opinions on the way society has been going and how kids are brought up nowadays. And maybe part of the reason why these active shooters or these kids that are going onto school campuses and shooting innocent kids, why that's happening. But there needs to be a solution to prevent this from happening, because I think we can all agree that it's only going to get worse from here.
Solutions. There's no one thing, and there's no way that we can say that here in California or Northern California is going to be the same response as in Southern California or in Texas or in small rural towns to big towns. You know, everyone has their own different hurdles and their advantages, and you have to know that in every agency that has a school in it, and even those that don't, because this is going to pull in everybody. You need to know the response, and you need to have a response.
Yes, there
can't be fumbling around trying to figure things out when it's happening,
right,
because it's already stressed. You need to be like, this is what we're doing, this is how it's going to go, and move.
Yeah. And this scenario just shows that under the most stressful events that are going to occur in your life, at that moment, you have to be able to critically think. And that just comes down to excellent training, conditioning your brain to manage stress and to be able to critical think under an intense amount of stress. So I would ask everybody that, hold your opinions on how these officers responded to this call, how the school staff handled the situation. I would ask that you understand that we're talking about a very small community who doesn't have most of the resources that huge agencies have. Okay. You and I were talking a little bit offline about, when you get a massive amount of cops together on one scene from different agencies, we do not all operate on the same channel. And a lot of times we can't communicate with each other's comms, right? So I could be standing shoulder to shoulder with you. You may get information over your radio that I'm not going to hear. And, things get convoluted very quickly. And to imagine going to a school shooting of that magnitude is probably, if not the most stressful, convoluted, fucked situation as a cop you're ever going to respond to. So
hopefully you're never going to respond to, but yeah.
Yes. That's why I would just ask that people have that mindset before you jump online, make comments, jump on the bandwagon of just completely fucking trashing the cops and how they responded to this. That's all I ask.
Not the cops. Don't trash anybody in this. Don't trash the
Except
cops.
for the motherfucker that went in there and decided to commit evil that day.
Don't trash the cops. Don't trash there's some people saying parents did stuff wrong. Don't trash the schools. Don't trash the politicians at this point. They're politicians. They're doing their job. Whether you agree with the way that they're doing things or not, that's a whole nother thing that we definitely won't get into probably ever.
Yeah.
And I think I ask everyone that's listening to this to share this podcast with everyone that you know, because the whole goal was to try to prevent the next incident.
Yes. And I do believe that, if heads start coming together, I truly think that we can mitigate some of these school shootings that are happening, because my God, they are happening more and more and more frequently. And the finger pointing, both sides of the aisle need to come together on this. It's gotten out of control at this point. Fuck, parents are terrified to send their own kids to school nowadays. That shouldn't happen.
No, it shouldn't.
So, we want to end this podcast. Please stay tuned to the very end. We want to recognize each victim that was killed in this shooting. And so please stay tuned to the very end. And thank you for listening.
Thank you.
I don't have anything else to add unless you guys have something to add.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate listening to this, and agree with it or don't agree with it. I think that the overall goal is just moving towards a better solution.
Yeah. Let's pay tribute to the victims. Thank you.
Thank you.